We live in an unstable world today. Billions of people across the globe are suffering from the impacts of a crippling pandemic, climate action, and accelerating loss of biodiversity. And our collective chosen path to a higher GDP at the cost of nature is massively affecting the way our food is produced, our health, our well-being. But even more, it's affecting our souls. Many of us have lost our connection to nature and are now seeking a purpose. Namaskar, I'm Sheeba Sen, co-founder of Hasten Regeneration. 11 years ago, a tryst with destiny brought me to a beautiful village in the Himalayas, and it was here that I found my lost connection to nature, and with that, my life's purpose: to restore hope in communities and to turn back centuries of degradation and build a more resilient future. My daughter was one at the time when I started working with rural mountain communities in India on issues of sustainable farming, of health, education, local unemployment. I got to travel the length of our country, from the lush Western Ghats to the deserts of Rajasthan, and I met hundreds of farmers, and I learned how rural economies are very intimately tied with how land is managed, farms and forests, how water management is critical to economic development, and how the global crisis of climate change and nature loss looks like on the ground, up close. It became evident that the solutions out there were slow, complex, and difficult to scale, addressing the core causes of degradation, which is essentially the environmental distress of human economic activity. And at the other end, at the market end, there were trillions of investment parked, waiting to be put in projects for quick impact. So as I was grappling with these findings, and the world is a small place, I met Peter at the height of COVID in 2020. And as Jan mentioned, Peter was at the other end of the world in the Silicon Valley with 25 years of experience in design and systems at IDEO, waiting to work on actual nature restoration projects, but at a scale that mattered. So Peter and I came together against the odds and founded Hasten Regeneration. So Hasten is a mashup of a project development company, restoration ecosystems enabler, and a design studio. Our core goal is to make nature-based projects highly scalable, highly transformative, and bankable. We design and develop place-based projects, say 100,000 hectares over one generation, to be regenerated. We bring together appropriate context-specific technologies, digital infrastructure, and community incentives together that will allow the core ecosystem assets of that place to regenerate and perform at new levels over time. Assets like soil, water, forests, food and energy. And as the transformation of these assets happens over time, new engines for economic growth are created in that local economy. And at the same time, we make progress towards our climate goals. We conserve biodiversity, sequester carbon, and build climate resilience. At Hasten, we've developed a 4 goals framework, which is at the back of every project that we are working. And these 4 goals always go together in any activity that we design for that local economy. First and foremost, nature goals. So we introduce innovative, context-specific methodologies for native species reforestation in the area that we are working. And going back to Jan, native species are essential to build the natural mycelium. It's a non-negotiable. But at the same time, we team this solution with complementary solutions that inhibit and mitigate the risks of forest deforestation in the future. So if we are reforesting degraded lands, we have to address deforestation risks of the future, like forest fires, floods, fuel extraction that is forest-based, monoculture plantations. Second is social goals. We design incentives for communities that automatically drive nature-positive behavior. 3, financial goals. We have to make these projects bankable. We drive multiple pools of capitals into our project regions. Typically, our projects start with non-profit funding at the pilot stage, leading on to carbon financing, to impact investing, and ultimately private institutional investments, which is a while away right now. And finally, collaboration goals. We bring multiple unlikely partnerships into our projects to make these projects highly scalable and viable. One of our key projects right now is in Uttarakhand for obvious reasons. We have a history in that region and many developed networks. But the genesis of that project has actually just started at the back of my cottage in my backyard in 2018. I planted a forest of 6,000 native trees, and over the next 3 years achieved a success of 90% survival rate, and this is what the place looks like now. So as this transformation was happening and COVID was subsiding, we brought together neighboring villages, about 50 of them, tested various species, roughly spanning about 30 species currently, brought the local government on board, and conducted pilots onto planting about 50,000 native trees and achieved a 90% success rate. This was building. This was very small, but building, and it was working. Working in an area where native species had a survival rate of 10 to 12% at best. As this was happening, we were clear that just alone replanting never transforms a land, never transforms a community, and never transforms the local economy. We had to reimagine the local economy and bring in solutions that were nature-based, which would de-risk these projects, make them more investable, and create multiple economic engines for growth. So one example I can talk about in this project was the pine needles. In Uttarakhand, in the Himalayas, annually there's over 16 million tons of pine needles that falls on the forest floor. We teamed up with a local NGO that was piloting the pyrolysis of these pine needles, and I know there are people talking about biochar here. Converting these waste, excess, highly inflammable pine needles, that is the biggest cause of forest fires in the Himalayas, turning that into biochar and producing byproducts of clean electricity and bio-oil. Now, biochar, as we all know, is a very stable form of carbon, is a great soil enhancement material. Very, very valuable. At the same time, with clean electricity, we have new economic options for alternative grids, for value chain solutions of cold storage for farmers, bio-oil in the pharmaceutical industries, seed banks and nurseries to fuel reforestation at scale. This is just some of the examples of multiple complementary economic nature-based solutions that are teamed up with some core interventions. So this multi-pronged systems-backed lens to designing and developing nature-based projects sits at the core of Hasten's approach to reviving nature and making these projects bankable. In fact, we believe that this integrated stack of solutions sets us apart from others in this sector, where most conversations for regeneration are reduced to tree planting projects or simply carbon projects. Now, for these projects to be bankable, they have to be inherently scalable. And that is the piece that we are working on right now, where the digital infrastructure plays out, where we have to look at what is the digital MRV protocols that we have to create transparency here. What are the LCAs that we have to do even in simple activities of growing a native tree that we go to that extent and show the footprint of these projects is highly regenerative. And I feel totally honored to be here with so many people working on these issues that can be brought into these place-based projects and actually lead to transformation on the ground. So what we're doing right now, we're exploring these interdependencies of how the local populations interact with their natural assets like forest, farms, water, and the physical assets in their physical region like mobility, roads, and what is the digital infrastructure that we can build here that create these data assets that drive nature positive behavior. For example, there's a smallholder farmer in our project area that is seeking a loan. How can that opportunity be used to incentivize that borrower to plant, say, 500 native trees in his village and look after them for the next 20 years? Making peace with nature is the defining task of the 21st century. We must make it a top priority for everyone, everywhere. These are the words of Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General. Making nature-based projects highly transformative, scalable, and bankable is critical to making peace with nature. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheeba. That's great.